Good morning. Welcome to Convince Me, presented by Bet365. We're conveniently coming to you at halftime of Argentina, France, because that's how much we care about your betting habits. Don't forget, at the bottom of this hour, the Touchdown Show with Nick Giffen and Gilles Gallant. We are starting off the Action Network Power Hour. In this first half of the hour, three experts, Simon Hunter, Sean Koerner, Chris Raybon, are going to convince me how I should spend my money. Today, we also got Darren Rovell on the Action Network news desk. We got Samantha Previte with some fantasy news, everything we're talking about, all the data, all the research, all the picks available for free in the award-winning Action Network app. As I said, we are presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in New Jersey and Colorado. Bet $1 on any game, get $200 free. Koerner, let's kick it off with some player props.
Yes, let's go with Zonovan Knight, under 13.5 receiving yards. If you don't know who that is, Chad, that is the starting running back for the New York Football Jets. And he has been their lead back over the past few weeks. And last week, he dominated early work once again, but it was Michael Carter who actually handled every single third down and 2-minute drill snap last week. Those are the most valuable when it comes to receiving yards for running backs. So it's going to be difficult for Knight to clear this number with that sort of usage going forward with Carter healthy. And all 9 of Knight's receptions this season have been against zone coverage. The Lions use man coverage at the 3rd highest rate. So it's not a really good matchup for him. Plus the QB change, Zach Wilson starting for the injured Mike White definitely hurts Knight here, because Zach Wilson, he's only targeted running backs 20% of the time this season, while Joe Flacco and Mike White have targeted their backs 25% of the time. So there's a lot of reasons to like the under here. I'm projecting this closer to 10.5. And while 3 yards doesn't seem like much in a market like this, it does matter. I have this going under about 62% of the time.
All right. So number one, cue the Zach Wilson jokes about targeting anybody, anywhere, at any time here. But more importantly, this number has been moving down. So I'm glad you mentioned where you have it projected to. What's the floor of what you would bet this number at?
I mean, I love it at 13.5. I would still bet it at 12.5. But I would stop there. Like I said, I have his median closer to 10.5, and every yard in these markets is massive. Every yard is worth about 6-7%. So no further down than 12.5, I would say.
I would be remiss, because, I'm a professional. I do my research before the show. I go into all of our projections tools for player props. I see what Koerner is doing. I see what Raybon is doing. Zonovan Knight and his unders on receptions and yardage are just bright red in our projections tools from both Raybon.
Bright green.
Bright green, right. Yeah, I meant hot. I meant super hot. Bright green in our projections tools. I encourage people to check that out. Simon Hunter, what do you got?
Chad, I'm going with who? Zay Jones, over 52 receiving yards. My guy is just tearing it up right now for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And we've seen that connection with Trevor Lawrence really grow these last couple of weeks. If you just look at the last 4 weeks, he's averaged over 11 targets per game. He's becoming his number 1 target option, Trevor Lawrence. There's just a trust there. We've seen Dallas now these last couple of weeks really look banged up in the secondary. I mean, Houston was moving the ball on them through the air without Brandon Cooks last week. That is an alarming thing if you're looking at a defense that, they pride themselves on having a good pass rush and then a strong secondary. They just haven't been there with all the injuries to Dallas this year. So these last couple of weeks, that's caught up to them, the injuries in the secondary. And on the flip side, we've only seen the Jaguars get better this last couple of weeks. Their offense has really improved. That's really starts with Trevor Lawrence, obviously. And we see that his safety blanket is Zay Jones. And now Zay Jones, a big body, tall receiver, is going against a smaller secondary in Dallas. I love that matchup for him. So the fact that he's hit this over 3 out of the last 4 games, that's just good value to me at 52.5.
And look, Trevor Lawrence, even when Zay Jones has had some drops, and he's had a lot of drops the past few weeks, as well as his target number has increased, he keeps going to him. You saw him in that game against Tennessee. He had some drops, and like in the back of the end zone, he's still kept trying to hit. Zay Jones, another number that's flying up. What's the ceiling of what you would bet this at?
Probably would go up to 54, but like to me, that's when the value starts flipping the other way.
Got it. All right, all the way up to 54. Raybon, what are you going to sneak in here?
Let's go with AJ Green under 17.5 receiving yards. First of all, this dude has cleared this number in 2 of 11 games this year. And he's played at least 2/3 of the pass snaps in 7 of those 11 games. He's played a handful of those games without DeAndre Hopkins, without Marquise Brown in the lineup, and he's still cleared this number twice in 11 games. His median receiving yards in a game this season is 7 yards. His average catch this year goes for 7 yards. His average yards after the catch, 0.8. This guy is washed. He may not even see a full complement of snaps because remember, last game, Dortch was his first game back, so he was eased in. And you also had Robbie Anderson emerge down the stretch in that Patriots game, ended up with 4 catches for 50 yards. Robbie Anderson really hadn't done much up to this point. So if Robbie Anderson sees an uptick in snaps, that's going to come out of AJ Green, because AJ Green is not one of those guys that kicks inside to the slot like Dortch, Brown, Hopkins can do that, but those other 2 really don't do it as much. So there's just a lot of reasons to fade AJ Green here. And plus, you're facing a Broncos defense that's number 3 in DVOA against the pass, number 4 against non-number 1, number 2 wide receivers in DVOA. And, you're going to be in the mile high. So, older guy in AJ Green might take more plays off anyway. So I just love this AJ Green under. I have him projected about 1 catch median. And, even with some regression, we'll give him 10 yards a catch, even though he's averaging 7. So I think you could bet this all the way down, to 10-5 here. Like this is way too high to me.
That is a massive delta. And by the way, you mentioned playing in the altitude. Simon Hunter said it before the show. Anyone over 30 is old. So AJ Green is practically a dinosaur at this point. And those are impressive stats. I love the AJ Green bet. I promise I'm going to make the AJ Green bet. I actually can't believe they're projecting him as high as they are and giving that kind of number. This is where the bias comes in, right? Because I've said this before, Raybon comes on last. He's got all these great stats. I love to go with what Raybon is saying in the player props, but I also have bias for Zonovan Knight now because I did all my research in the projections before the show. I'm going with Zonovan Knight under 13.5, under 12.5, which by the way, is where it's starting to settle right now. We're going with Zonovan Knight in the first segment of our show. Let's get to the fantasy start, sit, drop. Samantha, who are we talking about today?
We are talking about Gerald Everett, Evan Ingram, and Chig Okonkwo. So I am starting Everett, sitting Ingram, and dropping Okonkwo. Here is why. Ingram has been on a screaming hot streak of late, finished as the tight end 1 last week. I'm a bit concerned he may turn back into a pumpkin against the Cowboys, who rank number 1 in pass DVOA and have the toughest defense against fantasy tight ends. The unit has allowed just 1 touchdown to a tight end all season and has yet to allow a double-digit fantasy performance all year. So while I am not out on Ingram forever, I am out on him this week. Everett has been pretty unreliable, but he does get to face the very Titans that were just lit up for 162 yards and 2 touchdowns by Evan Ingram. In fact, the Titans have allowed the 5th most fantasy points to tight ends this year, so he has the best matchup of the trio, which could be just what the doctor ordered for a bounce back game this week. And then Okonkwo is definitely on the rise. He was one of my favorite waiver wire pickups after finishing as the tight end 9 and tight end 2 in back-to-back weeks. I'm just not quite ready to trust him over some of the more proven guys, especially while still splitting snaps and targets with Austin Hooper. He had a 49% snap participation rate last week compared to Ingram's 79% and Everett's 72%, which makes him a riskier play. And between him and Ingram, he just has less guaranteed value down the stretch. So I am okay with dropping him.
All right. Samantha's going to start Everett. She's going to sit Ingram. She's going to drop Okonkwo. Sean Koerner, what are you doing?
So I'm actually starting Evan Ingram against the Cowboys. He's coming off one of the best games from a tight end this season, but he's been inconsistent this season. So he's a boom bust tight end 1 option. this week, but he's going to see the most playing time out of these three tight ends. He's cleared an 80% routes run rate in 4 straight games. So he should have plenty of chances in what should be a pass heavy game script for the Jaguars. He's actually my tight end 5 right now. And I'm going to sit Chig Okonkwo. He's become a high end tight end 2 in limited playing time. So there's a chance his playing time could spike as soon as this week. If he were to top a 60 or 70% routes run rate, he has top 10 upside. So I kind of like stashing him just in case they unleash the rookie. We can't trust him quite yet as a tight end 1. So he's my tight end 14. And I'm dropping Gerald Everett just because, he's probably the safer option of these 3, but the tight end position is the lowest scoring. So I prefer to shoot for upside when making sit-start decisions. And Everett, he was a top 5, 10 tight end while Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were out, with both of them back healthy. That lowers his floor and ceiling quite a bit. So he's a tight end 12 for me. So he, out of these 3, he's the one I'm dropping.
All right, Raybon. Koerner is starting Evan Ingram. He's sitting Gerald Everett. Samantha is doing opposite. Are you a tiebreaker? Are you a wild card? What are you doing?
I'm definitely starting Evan Ingram. He's clearly the best out of that bunch. Gets the most playing time. Sitting Gerald Everett just because we're not going to start a Titans tight end over a Chargers tight end. Justin Herbert. Look at the props. He's projected for about 100 more yards than Ryan Tannehill. So I'll go with that. So starting Ingram, sitting Everett, dropping Chig Okonkwo.
All right, there you go. That is the roundup of tight ends to start, sit, and drop today. Darren Rovell, last week you did a weather report. It was completely off base with an hour kickoff. What can you tell us today?
Well, I can tell you that Quinnen Williams is questionable. That just came in. So if we think the vaunted Jets defense are going to stop the Lions today, that seems to be the game of the day in terms of what's happening. As people remember, the Jets were a favorite, and then it was ruled that Mike White wasn't playing, and then the Jets were the dog, and now the Jets are the favorite again. Most bet games: Lions, Jets, Cowboys, Jaguars, Bengals, Buccaneers. Most bet teams: Lions +1, Bengals -3.5. Obviously, people love what they saw last week, and Eagles 8.5. Chad, the Bears by handle are number 1, +8.5. Lions and Bengals. Most bet props by tickets: AJ Brown over 70.5 receiving yards. He went for 119 a couple weeks ago, but he's gone for 70.5 5 times this year. Cole Kmet over 3.5 receptions. He's only done that 4 times, but of course had 6 catches against the Packers. And Chris Olave over 57.5 receiving yards. He's actually done that 8 times, including the last 3 games. Chad?
All right, so you foreshadowed a couple of games that we're going to be talking about in the next couple of segments, including the spreads on the Bears and the Eagles and the total on the Jets and the Lions. Koerner, kick us off with some spreads.
So if you haven't noticed, I'm going with the Titans +3 today. I love this bet. The Titans, they're on a 3-game losing streak, but head coach Mike Vrabel, he's never lost 4 straight. He's actually 7-2 against the spread when his team is on a losing streak of 2 or more games. So I think this is a good buy low opportunity on them. Plus, the Titans match up pretty well against the Chargers defense that will be without Derwin James again today, which is a huge loss for them. But the Chargers ranked 29th in EPA per rush allowed. So, they're going to struggle to slow down King Henry today. And I think this is a good spot for Ryan Tannehill to bounce back as well. After facing 3 teams in a row that rank top 10 in pressure rate, he should have a much cleaner pocket tonight against a Chargers team that has generated the 6th lowest pressure rate on the season. And Tannehill's EPA per play ranks 19th out of 36 when facing pressure, and it jumps up to 4th out of 36 when he has a clean pocket. So I think he's going to have a good game tonight, throwing the ball to Chig Okonkwo, of course. And the Chargers, they're coming off a convincing 23-17 win over the Dolphins in prime time last Sunday Night Football. But that was actually the first time they've won by 3 or more since week 4, and that was against the Texans. So this isn't a team that should be favored by a key number of 3 against a competent team like the Titans. So I think this is a get right spot for the Titans, and I like getting them at a key number +3 here.
Look, generally, I think the precedent has been bet the Titans when they're underdogs, fade the Chargers when they're favorites. So, you're playing right into the middle of that lane. Simon, you're a Philly guy. I'm a Chicago guy. The Eagles are huge favorites against the Bears today. Let's talk.
Feels like deja vu. Last week, Darren told us that the Denver had the most money bet on them as a 9-point dog at home against the Chiefs. And we all know how that played out. They came back from 27 down. So going back to the well, Chad, taking a big dog at home against a team that, they just rightly so are the number 1 seed. But it makes sense that they're getting a lot of the money this week, the Bears. I think everyone's looking at the same thing where, yes, the Eagles are a very talented team, but they usually let teams back in these games. Even when they start out these games with big leads, they tend to let teams back in it. And here's a Bears team that, most games they're coming from behind, and that's usually how they like to play. Like they just let Justin Fields go out there, spread the ball out and do his thing. It's a great matchup for a running quarterback. This Eagles team has struggled against mobile quarterbacks. That's really their only weakness this year, are teams that can run the ball. So the fact that it was 9.5, and now it's down to 8.5 just makes sense. We knew the pros were going to come in, bet this number down. The public, we already talked about, Chad, this is going to be the most teased game. Everyone's going to have this in their money line parlay. All the money's going to be all over this Eagles team, who is on the road for the 2nd straight week before they head to Dallas next week on Christmas Eve to play in that huge game. So not only is it a look ahead spot for this Eagles team, but just a good spot for a Bears team at home after a bye week as a big, big dog.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of logical trends that make sense as to why the professional money would be coming in on the Bears. You get later into the year, you get into November, December, and these teams that have been playing well all year long against the teams that have been playing badly all year long, that number generally gets inflated since 2016. Teams that are at below 25% win percentage playing against teams above 65% win percentage, they're covering at a 57% clip since 2020. That number goes up to 62%. And that's a decent size sample size, almost 100 games. So yeah, we like the Bears today. We like the Bears a lot. We liked them at +9. We liked them at +8.5. Raybon, what do you got?
So I'm going with the Atlanta Falcons +4.5 against the New Orleans Saints. I think that people are kind of overrating this move from Marcus Mariota to Desmond Ridder. I actually think it's a positive for the Falcons for a couple of reasons. Number one, we already saw this Falcon team with Mariota, and they're still a top 5 offense on early downs, and they're top 12 overall in offensive DVOA, 16th in passing. So they've already kind of proven that, and this is with Mariota throwing the ball 23 times a game, completing 14 passes a game. So let's say Desmond Ridder struggles. We already know the Falcons can be a very even solid to good team with hiding the quarterback. But what usually happens on a bye week, which both the Falcons and Saints had, is that you get to study up on your opponent and make a really detailed game plan for your next opponent, which you don't always get to do on some of the other weeks of the season. Well, that the Saints can't really do that now because you don't have any tape on Ridder except some stuff in the preseason. We all know they don't really show much in the preseason as far as game planning or anything like that. So I think that's an edge for the Falcons. And take that away, and then Falcons have been the better team this year. They're 16th overall in DVOA. The Saints are 22nd. There's just not a lot separating these teams. The Saints have been a very average team, and the Falcons have as well. And now you're getting, over a key number in 3 in a division game late in the year that the Falcons lost by 1 point in the first matchup. I think it's just way too many points. And we talked about this every week as well. It's a lower scoring NFL this year. Games are tighter. Underdogs of more than a field goal this year with a total of 47 or less, 61-35 against the spread, 64%. And that doesn't even account for the fact that Ridder could actually be an upgrade on Mariota. Just throwing that out there. So give me the Atlanta Falcons against the New Orleans Saints +4.5.
Also, look, numbers between 3 and 10 this year. I think, Raybon, you said it on your podcast this week. Like when teams are dogs of between 3 and 10, they're covering at something like a 60% clip this year.
That was less than the trend I just gave, though. You keep doing that every week. You give a trend that's not as good as the trend that I just gave you. 61
I like to
35. That's
listen to me.
64%, Chad, over a field goal.
I like to give people the full spectrum of information. Let them.
We
make
want them
their
to
own
win
choices.
more, not less. You don't want to
Listen
give
to
them
me.
62 when they could be getting 64.
Fine, you win. Guess what? I'm not taking the Falcons. I'm taking the Bears at plus 8.5. Nothing you can say can make me change my mind, but I do want to pit you and Simon against each other as much as I love you both. You are all over the Giants. I was all over the Giants early in the week. Simon basically kidnapped me and made me decide he brainwashed me into taking the Commanders. I want to get Simon, why is Raybon wrong on the Giants? You're on mute, buddy.
There we go. that's a sign right there.
He doesn't want anyone to know. Maybe he's changing his mind.
Nah, not at all. I was gonna say, I think I'm 4-0 on this spot of Chad likes a dog on the road, and I'm on a favorite at home that no one likes, no one's betting. So I let the results speak for itself. It's the public thing to do is take the Giants after they just played this team 2 weeks ago to a tie, and they're like, wow, why isn't this line 3? Why is this line 3.5? Why is this line 4.5? Why is it 5? I'm just smart enough to step in it. It just stinks. This line stinks. People think the Giants are a good team that's going to play this game close, where I think Washington's better than people give them credit for. Now they've had 2 weeks to prep for a team they literally just played 2 weeks ago, and they didn't do anything between, where the Giants had just played a game against the Eagles, got blown out. Now going down to DC to play this team in a primetime game. I think the gig is up. The Giants are who we all thought they were going to be. They're not a good team. They have too many injuries, where Washington, ever since they've made a QB change, what have they done? They've won and covered 8 out of 9 games. So they're just a good team coming off a no cover, then a bye week. I like Washington in this spot.
Raybon, he says your pick stinks. That's what I heard.
Hey, I just think the Giants, they find a way to do this every single time. Dable has more wins than losses as an outright dog. Daniel Jones starts there 11-1 against the spread when the spread is 8 or under 8 points. And you look at, I just think Washington, I broke it down in my Sunday night article, but there's really been not much difference between Heineke and Wentz. And Wentz has actually played better in a lot of respects, but Heineke has gotten incredibly lucky, in a lot of the things he's doing. So read my Sunday night article for the full details. But I think Washington's actually benefited from more luck than the Giants since Heineke took over. Like, the Giants were clearly the luckiest team early in the year. I think Sean, was talking about that every week in his luck rankings. But I think Washington's got a lot of luck lately, and I think that's going to run out.
All right, we have an official bet off, Simon versus Raybon for the Sunday night game. Darren, give us some news.
All right, here we go. So let's look at overs. Most bet overs: Cowboys, Jaguars, 47.5. Eagles, Bears, 48.5. I think Eagles are always going to be on the bet of the over. And Giants, Commanders, 40.5. Most bet unders: Chiefs, Texans, 48.5. Lions, Jets, 43.5. And Cardinals, Broncos, 36.5. God, is that going to be a brutal game? That is going to be ugly. So ugly. I want to bet on it, because otherwise I'm not going to be paying attention to it. And just a reminder that Convince Me is brought to you by Bet365, the world's most favorite sports book. And we have a special offer. If you use the code ACTION, ACTION, you bet $1, you get $200 risk-free, and that applies in New Jersey and Colorado. Chad, back to you.
I don't know why, but every time you do the read, I feel like something's going to go tragically wrong.
So do I. I think so too.
All right, let's talk about some totals. Koerner, you're up first.
Yeah, I'm going with the Chiefs Texans under 48.5 here. And, before their 23-point outburst last week, the Texans offense was held to 17 or fewer points in 6 straight games. And last week, the Texans kind of surprised the Cowboys a bit with their QB committee with Davis Mills and Jeff Driscoll, using Driscoll as sort of a dollar store Taysom Hill. And that actually worked, and it helped them keep it close. But the Chiefs will be ready for that here, so I think they'll slow that down. And not only will the Texans be without their top 2 receivers again here, and Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins, but they also just lost stud rookie running back Damian Pierce to a season injury, so that's going to hurt this offense as well. So it'll be a craptastic trio of Rex Burkhead, Dare Ungumbuwale, and Royce Freeman handling running back duties going forward. Good luck with that. So it's hard to see the Texans being able to put up many points here, even in garbage time. And on the other side, I'm not going to try to make some case where the Texans defense will slow down the Chiefs. Instead, I just think the Chiefs will be more willing to go run heavy when they get up big here. After building a 27-0 lead over the Broncos last week, they were still letting Mahomes, sling it around, and he threw 3 interceptions and made it a game. So I think they'll be more content to just, walk away with the win here and keep it a little bit more lower scoring. So I bet this at 49.5. I still like it at 48.5. I'm projecting this closer to 47, which is a key number, but I think just the inept Texans offense will keep this a lower scoring game.
Yeah, it's oddly high for a Texans offense. It feels like they're expecting maybe the Chiefs to score 48 all by themselves. Simon, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm going with the Jets under 44.5. It's a game that I feel like a lot of people are not going to really look at this as an easy under, but to me, it's a matchup of, I know exactly what I'm getting from this Jets team. They have Zach Wilson in. That is going to switch up their whole mentality. And we saw early in the year, that was kind of when they grinded out those wins. They just really ran the ball, didn't put him in too many positions to lose them the game, but also not really throw the game down the field. Like they're just a completely different team with him and Mike White. And on the flip side, we know the difference between Detroit indoors and Detroit outdoors. Now we have them outdoors in the cold where, he had one great game, Goff, against the Bears, but this ain't the Bears defense. This is the defense that runs the highest rate of man. That's the thing he struggles with. That's what Goff does not like to see. He hates playing against man. And what do they have, the Jets? They have arguably two best corners to run man with. So just going off that matchup, it is a big deal. Williams is officially out now for the Jets. That is a big deal. That's why we've seen that total go from 43.5 back up to 44.5, because he's arguably one of the best D linemen in all of football. So that obviously gave me a little bit of pause, but the fact the line really hasn't moved that much, I still think it's a good under. Just on strength alone of this Jets defense, that's how they're going to have to win this game. They're not winning this game because Zach Wilson's coming in to be a hero. He's coming in just not to lose them the game. The defense, that's what they're going to need to win this game, because we've seen these last couple of weeks, Detroit, their offense is playing at a very high level. So taking Goff out of his comfort zone, that's the first step for the Jets to get a win in this game. And for them to win this game, I think there's going to be a nice chance at an under here. So I would take this down to 42.5, 43. I don't think I have to worry about that. Now, Williams is out. This will go up a point, maybe stay at 44, but I just don't see it dropping now with the injuries.
All right, Raybon.
I'm going with the Pittsburgh Steelers and Carolina Panthers under 37.5. Both of these teams are playing extremely run-heavy football over the last 2 weeks, which, of course, is good for an under because it keeps the clock running. Carolina, since Sam Darnold took over, has called the designed run 64% of the time. We haven't even seen that from a team like the Falcons. Like that's almost Kendall Hinton Broncos starting quarterback levels of running the football. And Pittsburgh's run defense has been 11th in DVOA, so they can stop it a lot better than a team like Seattle last week, which unfortunately didn't come through on this show with the under. But on the other side of the ball, you have Pittsburgh starting Mitch Trubisky, who's obviously not their preferred quarterback. We might even see some Mason Rudolph in this game. Carolina's defense has come on strong, just 15.5 points per game allowed over the last 4. Carolina at home since Wilkes took over as the interim coach. They played only 3 home games so far. They allowed 3 points, 15, and 10. So they have not given up anything when they're at home. Just an average of 9.3 points a game. And by the way, Pittsburgh's defense playing really well too. Obviously, part of that, TJ Watt coming back, but Pittsburgh has held 6 of its last 8 opponents to 18 or less. And the only exceptions were Philly and Cincinnati, 2 of the best offenses in the league. So when both of these teams play other mid offenses or worse, there's just no points being scored in these types of games. So I have this total around 35 in my projections. Mike Tomlin, he doesn't take a lot of chances. He kind of plays a conservative in games like this, and so does Wilkes, so, Tomlin, the under on the road, when Steelers had a road game going all the way back to 2014, 48, 22-1, it's well over 60%. So love this under 37.5 in Pittsburgh, Carolina.
Yeah, I'm just shuffling through the Rolodex in my head to see if I can come up with a stat that is actually worse than some of the ones that you just listed, and I can't. This is a crazy low total, but it feels like both of these teams would rather just see their defense on the field for 55 of the 60 minutes in the game. Like, this is a 17-10 game, and it's going to be enjoyable to watch if you bet the under, like I am. Raybon, you win that round. Carolina, Pittsburgh, under 37.5. Well done. And you didn't even have to be mean to me to win the round. As a reminder, we got the touchdown show coming up right after this with Gilles Gallant and Nick Giffen. Darren, you put a poll out in the field asking people their favorite anytime touchdown scores for the day, cleverly tied to the show. What do you got?
All right, we got Brian Robinson plus 110, Saquon Barkley plus 120. I wrote originally, and this was my bad mistake of the day, I was just coming out of my son's hockey game. I wrote Chris Samuel because of the Commanders, Redskins. Chris Samuel, of course, would not have been a touchdown scorer. He was the 3rd overall pick in the 2000 draft and retired in 2009. So I changed it to Curtis Samuel, who's now the wide receiver for the Commanders, and Daniel Jones. We have Saquon Barkley leading at 48%, then Daniel Jones at 22% at plus 240, Brian Robinson at 20%, and Curtis Samuel at 10%.
All right, whip around, boys. Koerner, we'll start with you. Robinson, Samuel, Barkley, Jones, somebody else.
I'm going with Terry McLaurin at plus 160. He has 0 touchdowns on 6 end zone targets this season. That's the second most end zone targets without a touchdown this season. So he's due for some positive regression there. Plus, he scored a touchdown against the Giants last time they faced 2 weeks ago.
That is scary. Simon, what do you got?
Give me Heineke, anytime touchdown. I love it. He's a mobile guy.
All right, Koerner and Simon both not going with anybody in the poll. Raybon, are you going with anyone in the poll or somebody else?
Now I'm going to go off the board too. Even though I do like the Giants in this game, I think Jahan Dotson at plus 250 is really interesting. Giants play a ton of man coverage. Dotson has 4 touchdowns on 10 targets against man coverage this year. So I think he has a good bet at finding his way to the end zone.
I love that one, actually. I've loved watching him play this year when he's been able to play. I feel like if he'd had a full season, he'd had a better shot at Offensive Rookie of the Year. All right. This has been Convince Me, presented by Bet365 for Sean Koerner, Simon Hunter, Chris Raybon, Samantha Previte, Darren Rovell, our fantastic producers. I am Chad Millman. Let's kick it to the touchdown show with Nick Giffen and Gilles Gallant. Take it away.
Thank you, Chad, and the whole Convince Me crew. Welcome to the touchdown show on the Action Network, presented by Bet365. I'm Gilles Gallant with the Action Network, joined every week with my man, Dr. Nick Giffen. Now, Nick, let's talk touchdowns. 3 games yesterday, arguably 3 of the best matchups. I was a little inebriated last night. I might still be drunk, but I think I'm going to be okay for today. Still some value on the board. We're going to highlight some matchups we like. And then, of course, we're going to preview Sunday Night Football between the Commanders and Giants.
Yeah, well, you deserve to be a little bit drunk because you had a great day yesterday. I myself, 4 straight Sundays in the green, so let's keep it rolling, Gilles. So you mentioned Sunday Night Football and some other games. We're going to be giving out which players we are buying or selling from those games. And of course, we're going to have our 3 official anytime touchdown picks for today's 1 and 4 p.m. slate. For any additional picks, make sure to follow each of us in the Action Network app.
Absolutely. And also make sure to stick around after we're finished giving out our picks. We're going to preview some matchups because we're going to reveal our special anytime touchdown boosted parlay from Bet365. We've hit 3 this year. We hit 1 last week. No gimmicks, just some boosted odds on a nice 2-leg parlay. Also, make sure to look out for the Action Network Twitter account for our contest, where you will reply who you think will score the first touchdown in Giants Commanders, and you can win $100 with the correct answer. And the Touchdown Show is presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. If you sign up with promo code ACTION, you'll get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in both New Jersey and Colorado. All you got to do is bet $1 on any game. You get $200 free. All right, Nick, let's get started. I'm going to give out my first best bet of the day, and we're going to go to Cowboys versus the Jaguars. I don't normally bet many Cowboys just because I feel like I'm a little too close to the source material. But I really like a guy to score here today. I'm liking Dalton Schultz at plus 225. And Schultz had 10 targets last week. He had 3 touchdowns this year. It's almost a tale of 2 seasons for Schultz, Nick. Like since Dak Prescott has come back, Schultz has really come alive in this offense. With Cooper Rush, he was averaging just under around 2 targets per game. With Dak, he's averaging 6.4 targets. Also, I don't think it's a coincidence that Schultz has scored all 3 of his touchdowns with Dak at quarterback. He had 8 touchdowns last year. Now, they're facing the Jaguars defense. Kind of made the Titans look pedestrian, but still got exposed by tight ends. Chigozie Okongwu, if I said that correctly, he did get his 2nd touchdown of the season against them. In fact, the Jaguars ranked bottom 5 in defensive DVOA versus tight ends this year. 5 touchdowns allowed to the position. Why I bring that up is 4 of those touchdowns have been scored over the last 5 games, so it's regressing as the season goes. And Schultz, he is 3rd amongst all NFL tight ends in red zone targets with 14. So I like my chances that he gets in the end zone here against the Jaguars. So give me Dalton Schultz to score in week 15.
There you go. I like it. And, our Action Network projection gurus, Sean Koerner, Chris Raybon, showing a little bit of value there, plus 225. So I definitely like that pick. For my first pick, I am going to go over to the Bears versus the Eagles game in this 1 p.m. time slot. And I'm going to take David Montgomery plus 145. Yeah, Monty to score a touchdown. Obviously, earlier in the year, he had to battle with Khalil Herbert for red zone work. And of course, he's still battling with Justin Fields for red zone work. But with Khalil Herbert out, Montgomery has absolutely been a red zone workhorse. He has 8 red zone carries in the 3 games where Khalil Herbert has been out since he got put on IR. And in those 3 games, he has 2 touchdowns as well, both coming in the red zone. So definitely good that he's going to get that increased red zone work. And now he also has a really good matchup to boot. The Eagles are a run funnel defense. They rank 2nd defensively against the pass in DVOA, but they're only 24th against the rush in defensive DVOA. So certainly you want to be attacking the Eagles on the ground. I mean, if you remember their only loss of the year, the Washington Commanders just ran through them.
I think yeah.
Oh, yeah. I remember. That's my team right there. But, Commanders just ran through them on the ground. And that's the game plan if you're going to beat the Eagles. And fortunately for the Bears, they are the NFL's most run-heavy team, obviously, with the Justin Fields-led attack. But also the Bears are number 1 in yards per carry. So this is just a great situation here. I think they can move the ball a lot versus the Eagles. Additionally, there is going to be a weather concern. And normally I save these weather concerns for the kickers, but I do think this could actually help Montgomery a little bit because, it could force teams especially if you're getting like 23 mile an hour gusts, which are forecast. If you get a little gusty bit there, you may not want to pass it as much. So it may force the Bears to run even more than they already are. Plus, if there's a long field goal on 4th down, you may end up passing it up and trying to go for it, both of which increase touchdown opportunities. So David Montgomery is going to be my first pick for week 15.
Yeah, it seems to be the en vogue thing now to want to take running backs against this Eagles defense, especially with how strong they are against the pass with Darius Slay and James Bradbury. And if anything, Nick, I think the presence of Justin Fields actually increases the probability of David Montgomery scoring just because of how much attention he draws, the RPO offense of what they can do. So David Montgomery, solid pick to get us started here for week 15. Let's look at a marquee matchup, but we're going to be looking at the 4 o'clock slate because honestly, the 1 o'clock slate, outside of some of the picks that we like, I'm not as enthused with it, but I do like the idea of some touchdown scorers in Titans versus Chargers. Now, the total in that game is set around over-under at 46.5. And a guy that I really like in this game to score, Nick, is Josh Palmer. I'm seeing his touchdown odds around plus 250 to plus 270. He had 7 targets last week, even though both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are back. He played over 80% of the snaps. honestly, couldn't have a better matchup versus the Titans, who are bottom 3 in catches, yards, and touchdowns to wide receivers. I think the presence of Mike Williams will actually be able to allow him to have some better matchups in the secondary against the Titans. The guy that I'm selling, though, is on the Titans. I'm going to be selling Robert Woods. Robert Woods, I think it's kind of a lost cause now from a passing standpoint for the Titans offense. Just not been successful at all with the Tennessee Titans. 1 touchdown this season. He just can't get separation like he's used to. He's not being used the way that Sean McVay was using him, but he's being priced as if he's still on the Rams. And the Titans right now, they're such a predictable offense. They're second in the NFL on first and second down for running rate. They rarely don't give Derrick Henry at least 2 goal attempts at the goal line. So I'm going to be selling Robert Woods and I'm buying Josh Palmer. How about you?
Yeah, real quick, I'm just going to tag on your Robert Woods point here. He has struggled mightily versus man coverage this year. Might just be part of, getting a little bit older there. And Chargers are one of the highest man coverage rate teams in the league. So just another point there to your Robert Woods point. But for my buy, I'm going with you. I'm taking Josh Palmer at plus 270. Tennessee is dead last versus the deep ball and dead last versus wide receivers that line up on the right side in defensive DVOA. And while Palmer isn't actually the deepest of deep threats, he's still deeper threat than Keenan Allen on that Chargers defense. So on that Chargers offense. So, that definitely helps right there. And he does line up on the right the most, especially when Mike Williams is playing, because Williams lines up on the left 50% of the time. And then, of course, when Keenan Allen's playing, Keenan Allen dominates the slot snaps there. So even though Palmer is only lined up on the right about 37% this year, it should be higher when he is playing with Williams and Keenan Allen both in as well. So definitely like that. I am selling Ryan Tannehill, your guy here, one of your guys, at plus 400. The Chargers, yeah, exactly. The Chargers, they do allow the 4th fewest red zone rushes to the quarterback position. And I just think Tannehill's odds are just too short here compared to what we've seen. We've seen mid 400s. I think he's even cracked the plus 500 mark a couple times this year or longer. So I'm just going to sell Ryan Tannehill here, partly for the odds, but also just, again, the Chargers' 4th fewest red zone rushes allowed to quarterbacks this year.
Yeah, and there's only one circumstance that Tanny is going to score, and usually it's when they're at the goal line and you allow Derrick Henry to be almost like a decoy, and then he completely goes the opposite way. And that's been successful for him. He's just not been able to pull that off this year, especially since that ankle injury. And I did notice with some books, they actually had Malik Willis listed to score a touchdown around the plus 200, plus 250 odds. I'm wondering if maybe the Titans are leaking some of their game plan here, maybe trying to get Malik Willis maybe a goal line carry as well, which also contributes to why we're going to be selling Tannehill for this matchup. Let's move over to our second best bet. I'm looking at the Chiefs versus the Texans. Now, a lot of people will be thinking about the Chiefs side for scoring touchdowns. I'm actually looking at the Texans side, and I'm going to take Chris Moore to score a touchdown at plus 260. Yes, more touchdowns. Wide receiver 1 by default now, with half the Texans offense being ruled out this week. There's no Dameon Pierce. There's no Brandon Cooks. There's no Nico Collins. And Moore has taken advantage. 10 targets last week versus the Cowboys, played over 80% of the snaps. But why we're taking a Texans wide receiver is the Chiefs have just been horrendous versus wide receivers this year. They're last in the NFL, 19 touchdowns allowed to the position. You were very aware of this when you saw Jerry Jeudy, who cashed last week. He went on to have the best game of his life, 3 touchdowns, when it was super obvious who the targets were going to. And the way the game script is lining up, because it's such a large spread for the Chiefs, lining up for a big blowout here, which means that the Texans are likely to throw even more in an attempt to just play catch up or even just put any points on the board. I would also say if you don't like Chris Moore, you could also consider Philip Dorsett too. He's going to be wide receiver 2 today. His odds are around plus 350 to plus 400. I would even throw maybe a feeler on Jordan Akins, but really trying to stick with the wide receiver bets in this one. So that is my second best bet of week 15. We're going with Chris Moore.
Yeah, I like Akins as well. We're definitely showing projection value on him and Chris Moore. One other thing I noticed on Twitter, you could get Chris Moore to have the most receiving yards at plus 650 in this game. I think that's a pretty interesting one there as well. Anyway, moving over to my second touchdown pick. I'm going to go over to this Saints versus Falcons game. Rashid Shaheed plus 500.
I love this
for
pick.
a touchdown. Yeah, dude, I'm excited about this one. Shaheed has turned in 3 straight games of 49% plus snaps. Let's say half the snaps or more. We'll round it there. I'm a mathematician. I can do that. But, that means he's increased in each of the last 4 games because those 3 were over 49% and the one before that wasn't. So he's increased from 13 to 49 to 53 to 61% of snaps in each of the last 4 games. His targets have also increased as well. It went 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4. So, if we're continuing that
natural
trend,
progression.
Yeah, exactly. Probably going to have a few targets in this game. And he does face a bad Atlanta defense versus the pass. They're 29th in defensive pass DVOA, but it gets even better. They're 24th versus the deep ball compared to just 20th versus the shorter pass under 15 yards. And Atlanta is 26th and 30th versus passes to the left and right, respectively, versus 4th in passes over the middle. So 4th in the NFL in passes over the middle, really good over the middle. But Rashid Shaheed lines up on the outside about 71% of the time. And that's probably even going to be higher with Jarvis Landry back in the fold, dominating the slot position there. So definitely this lines up well for Shaheed. His average depth of target is 15.8, which puts him in that deep ball category there. Shaheed, he is just in a really good spot here. And he's destroyed zone coverage to the tune of 3.41 yards per route run and only 1.61 versus man coverage. But Atlanta, they've switched recently to more zone coverage. In each of the last 5 games, they've ended up below the league median in man coverage rate, which means a lot more zone coverage rate in each of those last 5 games. So sounds like Atlanta's made some defensive adjustments and are playing a lot more zone coverage, which Shaheed will eat up all day. So I love Rashid Shaheed plus 500 to get in the end zone. I'm putting 3/4 of a unit, 0.75 units on this one on Rashid Shaheed.
Solid pick, Nick. And I think too, one of the things about Shaheed, I tweeted this out during the Buccaneers game in the Saints last game. He was the best player on the field. He was everywhere. He was getting rushing attempts as well. I think that's one thing that I don't want to say you glossed over it, but there was a lot more focus on the pass. But kick returns, he could have an explosive. He has a 73-yard rushing touchdown this year. So there's lots of different angles for Shaheed to be able to score. So getting that around plus 500, especially when I've seen some plus 250s out there for him, awesome value. Good find. Let's look now at the Bengals versus the Buccaneers. We were just talking about the Bucs and how Rashid Shaheed looked good against them. Let's talk about who we're buying and selling for touchdown scores in Bengals Buccaneers. And I like Rachaad White at plus 175. Really liking his involvement lately, like double-digit carries in 3 of the last 4 games, 20 catches over the last 3 games as well. Kind of seems to be taking over that role from Leonard Fournette. Now, it's not the best odds. You're not going to be able to, he's running back 1. You're not really going to try to get over plus 200 odds usually in this spot. But really, I think it's the only chance that the Bucs have to win this game because they got to establish the run because they're so predictable offensively with how many times that Tom Brady throws the ball. He was throwing it 44.5 times per game this season. That's a career high. So I think Rachaad White could score against this Bengals defense. It's probably my favorite value of any Buccaneer in this game. Who I'm selling, though, and this is more a subliminal or a subtweet, I guess, to a couple people who asked me about this. I'm fading Russell Gage just because he scored last week on the flukiest touchdown of all time. I'm not just going to say, let's go at him again just for plus 550. I'm a little bitter because I had Chris Godwin last week, went right off of Godwin's chest, right into Gage's hands. He has 3 targets in 2 games. Evans and Godwin haven't scored since the Browns game. Brady's going to favor them over Gage or even Julio Jones. So any of these periphery wide receivers like a Julio Jones or a Russell Gage, Scotty Miller, that kind of thing, I want no part of. And Rachaad White on the Bucs is who I like.
Yeah, I understand that, and I'll be with you there on that one. So first, let's get to my buy. I'm actually not buying anybody, but I am close on Jamar Chase. at plus 100. I think it is the best matchup here. You know, Tampa Bay is weakest versus the slot and, you know, wide receivers lining up on the left side, which does make up about 2/3 of Jamar Chase's snaps. And Tampa Bay also does have a bit of a banged up secondary. I know they're missing one or two cornerbacks. Their safeties are game time decisions. So definitely a little banged up in the secondary. But other than that, I'm not buying anybody. And the reason is I'm selling Tampa Bay. I'm selling their whole passing game. Tom Brady only has 4 multi-touchdown games out of 13 games this year. You wouldn't think that for Tom Brady, but it's true. And 3 of those 4 multi-touchdown games have come against bottom half pass defenses. And none of them have come against top 10 pass defenses, which of course, Cincinnati is 9th in defensive pass DVOA. So really tough sell, buy here for me on Tampa Bay, which is why I am selling their passing game. Also, you know, Samaje Perine, I am selling him at plus 340.
Okay.
Tampa Bay, man, they stop passes to running backs. They allow just 4.9 passing attempts per game and the fewest yards per game in the NFL to the running back position. So I think if, you know, Cincinnati scores, it's probably going to have to come via Joe Mixon. And I just think I love the under in this game. I think it's going to be really hard for teams. I think it's going to be really hard for teams to score. And I wrote up even in my kicker piece that I like Tampa Bay's kicking under just because I don't think Tampa Bay can really get in the end zone through the air much. I think it's probably going to have to come on the ground, which is, you know, when you picked Rachaad White there, at least you got the running back.
Yeah, and with an over-under at 45, it feels a few points heavy. I'm the same with you. When I'm doing projections, I'm trying to find where the points are coming from. And with the way that Tampa's offense has looked, especially in the pass game, I don't know where they're coming from. That's why I was saying if you're going to take anybody, he's probably going to force feed it to Evans and Godwin for their customary like double-digit targets. But once you get past that, I can't trust anybody. There's just no rhyme or reason or statistic that could show me that would be like, okay, we need to bet on this guy. So, yeah. So let's move now to Sunday Night Football. Marquee matchup. Bit of a lower total, though, over under 40.5. The last matchup a couple weeks ago finished in a 2020 tie. Bit of a disagreement here on between who Nick and I like here, which is fun. I personally like Richie James and Isaiah Hodgins to score. I like the periphery wide receivers in this game to score. And you want to know why? Because I have got a ton of Giants fans in my life. And again, just I don't choose my friends. This is just what happens. You know, I'm Eagles fans, friends. I got Giants fans too.
And you have Commanders friend.
Absolutely. And one of the things that they would keep reminding me of, they're like, dude, you got to bet on Isaiah Hodgins. You got to take Richie James. And I'm like, man, the passing game for the Giants, I can't do it. Well, I'm wrong. They combined for 5 touchdowns over the last 4 games. Both have played more snaps than Darius Slayton or Kenny Golladay over the last 3 games. I think part of it too is if Richie James scores, I just want to have that one opportunity to yell like, I'm Dick James, bitch. And again, I just thought it would be funny. Dad jokes just run in my house. So, but the guy who I'm fading in this game, actually a pretty popular pick, is Daniel Jones at plus 310. He may get the yards. I just don't think that he's going to be able to score on this defensive line. He's faced the same defensive line like 7 times in his career. It's a lot of the same guys like a Jonathan Allen, a Montez Sweat, a Daron Payne. He's only scored once. And for me, from a projection standpoint, I want at least plus 400 for this matchup facing this type of offense, especially on the road. So I'm going to be buying Richie James and Isaiah Hodgins, and I'm selling Daniel Jones. How about you?
Yeah, well, let's get to my buys first. Excuse me. I am buying Curtis Samuel. He is at plus 200. I know you can find some plus 265s out there. So definitely would grab him at that number. And I'm also buying Jahan Dotson plus 340. And what I really like about these buys is the Giants, as far as for Curtis Samuel, Giants nickelback Darnay Holmes has allowed an 18% target rate and about 1.3 yards per route run. Worst of all, the Giants cornerbacks and The Giants are 32nd in pass DVOA over the middle and 26th in pass DVOA versus balls passed under 15 yards, which is right in Curtis Samuel's wheelhouse over the middle and the shorter part of the field. They're also really bad run defense. That's 31st in DVOA versus the run. So Curtis Samuel, both facets of the game here, has a nice matchup. As far as Dotson, Giants do play the most man coverage in the NFL, the most predictable team on defense in that regard. And all 4 of Jahan Dotson's touchdowns have come versus man coverage this year. Also, Nick McLeod, who he would probably be lining up against the most, has battled an illness this week and is questionable. Although I do think he will play, it may not help him that much to, have been battling an illness all week. And of course, for my sell, Gilles, the show wouldn't be fun if we always agreed. We got to disagree somewhere. So I am selling Richie James. I'm selling him at plus 500. And my reason is more matchup oriented. Washington's defense has only allowed 2 touchdowns to the slot this year. And also Richie James, he is coming off of a concussion, which he suffered late in the game against Philadelphia. He was in the protocol this week and is expected to play. But one of those things where, you always think about like Tua or any other guys that have, kind of come off of a concussion and they take one shot and then all of a sudden they're right out of the game.
They're
again.
in the blue tent.
Yep, exactly. The blue tent. So a little worried about that, but also just don't think the matchup is prime for Richie James. And, you mentioned he has scored 3 touchdowns in his last 4 games. The one game he didn't was against Washington.
This is true. And the one thing I would also say about Richie James is it doesn't really matter the circumstance. They could be non-consequential touchdowns because all 3 of his touchdowns that he scored were in the last couple minutes of the game where the game was already decided. It didn't even matter. And guess what? Garbage time touchdowns count too. So really, what I hope is we're both right. Richie James scores at the end of the game. Doesn't matter. Commanders win. They cover easily. And that would be hilarious. So
that would be.
All right. Now, normally in this segment, when we do our third pick, normally we try to find a nice long shot pick that we like. Maybe it's a quarterback or maybe we find a guy that we both agree on and we want to collab and both put some money on it. Well, marrying both worlds here, we're going to do a collaboration pick on a long shot pick. It is the Hide Your Mom collab pick of the week. And we are taking Zach Wilson to score a touchdown at plus 600. And we want him to score a touchdown. Yeah, Hide Your Mom. And honestly, though, Nick, if you can find a bigger motivation spot in the NFL this season, I dare you to find it because Wilson is legitimately playing for his job. 5 rushing touchdowns in 20 games played, though. He had 4 last season in a 5-game stretch when he came back from injury. He was actually up to over 12 units in profit last season if you would just blindly bet his touchdown prop every week. Why we're liking it, though, not just for the motivation, but we're facing a Lions defense that has just been gouged all season by the run. They've allowed over 5 yards per carry, 13 rushing touchdowns. We're getting a quarterback at home in cold weather with his job on the line. I expect him to be assertive in the red zone and try and win back this locker room.
And win back the moms. So I'm also on Zach Wilson anytime touchdown plus 600. And I'm actually, again, putting 3/4 of a unit here on this one, like I did with Rashid Shaheed. And, again, same thing. After his comments prior to his benching, he has something to prove. He needs to win back that locker room, like you said. This is also just a great spot for him against a Lions defense that is susceptible to rushing quarterbacks. They have given up 532 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground to quarterbacks this year. Both of those numbers are the most in the NFL. That also includes 18 red zone rushes by quarterbacks, which again, number 1 in the NFL in terms of worst for Detroit there. And that's because, they're bad versus the rush. They're bad versus the pass. They also score a lot offensively, Detroit does. So these games tend to be high scoring against Detroit, which creates a lot of touchdown opportunity. We haven't projected, get this, Gilles, we haven't projected at plus 417. So plus 600 is a steal. That is, man, we stole that one, Gilles. So I love these odds here. And I think Zach Wilson is going to make us feel great after this week. I really do. I think he's going to get in the end zone.
Absolutely. And I would still play this down to plus 500, maybe even down to plus 450. But, we were able to find some decent value there. So Zach Wilson, let's get into the end zone, buddy. And then that way we can give everybody's mom a nice Christmas card for the year. So, okay, now those are our 3 picks each. We're going to reveal now the anytime touchdown boosted parlay, courtesy of Bet365. And the 2 players that are going to be part of the boost is Jalen Hurts and Travis Kelce. We were having odds around plus 229 if you had parlayed them before the boost. Now with the boost, it's up to plus 285. Nick, I don't feel like I have to try to sell these 2 guys, but I think we should. Okay, Jalen Hurts leads all players in red zone carries with 40. He has 10 rushing touchdowns this year. He has 18 rushes inside the 5-yard line. So if they get down to the goal line, he's going to probably take it over Miles Sanders. Just since the start of last year, he has 20 rushing touchdowns in his last 28 games. And he's facing a Bears team that has also allowed a ton of rushing touchdowns. The second most rushing touchdowns in the NFL. Also for Kelce. Now, Kelce, he hasn't scored in a few weeks, but still leads the NFL in red zone targets. Kind of matchup proof. Now, the Texans defense hasn't really allowed a ton of damage to tight ends, but it's not like this defense is some juggernaut that we can't fade. Like half their team is out for today. So outside of the blowout potential versus the Texans, I don't know how this boost doesn't hit.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is a really, really good spot. And my contribution to this, we're always going to go with the projections on these. And so we have both players north of 60% to get into the end zone. So obviously, again, multiply them and then figure out the odds that way. Turns out our fair odds projection is right in between what it was and what it is now. And that's at plus 255. So this boost got us over the hump on fair odds here, getting us up to plus 285. We're showing plus 255 fair value. So 30 cents on the dollar is nothing to sneeze at here. I love this boost. And, it's one of those things where it's 2 popular players. So very often the price will be driven down just because they are popular, which is why we weren't showing fair value on them beforehand. But thanks to Bet365, we got over the hump here and we have projection value.
Yes, thank you to Bet365. And a reminder, the Touchdown Show is presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. If you sign up with promo code ACTION, you'll get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in both New Jersey and Colorado. All you got to do is bet $1 on any game. You get $200 free. So that's all for today. 3 picks from me, 3 picks from Nick. We're going to see you next Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern as part of the Action Network Power Hour. And if you misconvince me, you can rewatch the show or download the Action Network app, get all of their picks in one place. And you can also check out all of our Week 15 touchdown bets in the Action app. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at GDog5000. Make sure to follow Nick as well at RotoDoc. I want to thank you again for watching the Touchdown Show presented by Bet365. Bon chance.